Welcome back, Sebastian here. So starting this series, taking a look at each of the 10 Formula One teams after the first quarter of the season. Yes, I know it's very fast. We're already a quarter of the way through the 2024 season. Of course, starting at the bottom of the Constructors' Championship and moving our way up. So starting with Sauber, 10th in the Constructors, a pretty rough start to the season. And now first, kind of going over their results so far. These are, of course, just from the Grand Prix, not the sprint. So, in Bahrain, Bottas finished 19th, Zhou 11th, the closest they would ever get to points in a main Grand Prix. And of course, one of the early themes to the start of their season has been the fact that their pit stops have routinely been very, very slow. They, of course, basically made some new wheel nuts for this year, and they've had some real issues with them at high temperatures, basically the temperatures that they run at when the cars are going around on track for laps after lap after lap. But yeah, that definitely influenced some of their early results. Saudi Arabia, Bottas 17th, Zhou 18th. Australia, Bottas 14th, Zhou 15th. And then Japan, Bottas 14th, and Zhou mechanical DNF there. And then China, it was Bottas' turn for mechanical DNF, where Zhou finished 14th. And then last time out in Miami, Bottas 16th and Zhou in 14th. So yeah, no points at all this year. Average finishing position for the two drivers, Zhou actually surprisingly leads the way in this category. 15.14 for Bottas, and for Zhou 13.14. So these include both the main Grand Prix and the sprint results as well. But qualifying is a very different story at Sauber this year. For Bottas, average starting position is 14th, but for Zhou 17.5. And in qualifying head-to-head, this is probably the biggest indication for me that Zhou probably won't be re-signed next year, regardless of what else happened in the driver market. So it's 6-0 by my calculation, but one of those sessions, Saudi Arabia, Zhou did not set a time in qualifying because he crashed pretty heavily in FP3. So basically, depending on how you want to look at it, if you want to include that mistake causing him miss qualifying, if you want to include that or not, it's still not a great picture for Zhou. Average qualifying delta 0.377 seconds, so almost 0.4 of a second, which is frankly too much for a driver in his third year in F1. Last year in 2023, it was 0.288, so just shy of 0.3 of a second. So the fact that it ballooned almost another 1/10 of a second is definitely concerning if you're Zhou. Average points above expected for Bottas, negative 0.72, and for Zhou, negative 0.11. So because Bottas' starting positions have generally been much closer to the points, it would be about basically 75% chance by now that he would have gotten points, and for Zhou, basically not really expected to score points based on where he's starting the main Grand Prix. So finishing off with a look at Sauber, the last 2 years, these 3 years, and basically the 3 years of the turbo hybrid era. So 2022, 55.6 in the Constructors, average pole gap of 1.456 seconds. That was 6th overall. So actually a pretty good result based on how this team has done historically. Really aided early on in the season by the fact that they had a very light car, so they were much closer to that weight limit than the other cars on the grid. And in the first quarter of the season, they had 31 points. So almost got over half their points was from those first quarter of the season. 2023, 16 points overall, 9th in the Constructors. Average pole gap improved to 1.294 seconds, but didn't improve that much. A lot of teams jumped them, so they dropped to 9th overall in that metric. And in the first quarter of the season, they had 6 points. So about a bit more than you would expect based on if you split the season up equally into 4 parts. In 2024, pretty rough start to the season, no points. 10th in the Constructors with only one 11th place finish. Albon in the Williams has multiple 11th place finishes. That's why they are below Williams in the Constructors. Average pole gap 1.389 seconds, so it's basically gotten worse by about 1/10 of a second compared to last year, but they're still 9th overall in that metric. So for Sauber, pretty tricky start to the season, and this is kind of a continuation of what I said last year. It really feels like since 2022, they're basically just holding on, waiting for Audi to show up, which they will be doing in 2026. And yeah, I don't really expect much improvement this year or next year, to be honest. And for Sauber, I think the last thing to finish up on is that the really interesting dynamic. We know that Nico Hulkenberg is going to be coming into the team in 2025, which means that at least one of Bottas or Zhou will be let go at the end of the year, possibly both. Depending on how things shake up in the drivers' market. So that means that there will be a fair amount of competition at the team between Bottas and Zhou to see who could possibly get that remaining seat. Although I do think at this point it's probably not going to be either of them, and perhaps we drive like Sainz, maybe Ocon instead. But yeah, that internal competition between Bottas and Zhou should be pretty interesting as the race season heats up towards the summer portion of the season. So anyway, there you go. There's my review of kind of Sauber's first quarter of the 2024 F1 season. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.